In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So today is the fourth in the series on the ladder of divine ascent. So in the first three talks, we covered the first 12 steps. And as we talked about before, the ladder has 30 steps in it. The book has 30 steps. So we're just going to talk about the first, we talked about the first 12 steps, and now we're going to start on step 13. And if you remember this icon, this is the icon of the ladder itself. And as you can see, it's got 30 steps. And as we move up towards heaven, Satan is trying to grab us, and he's trying to pull us off on various steps. And these are all different places where we can get hung up. And the step that we're going to talk next about is despondency. And that's a word that maybe we're not very familiar with. So I'll go through a definition. It's a loss of courage, confidence, or hope. And this is today, if you're here for Abuna's sermon, it's exactly the sermon that Abuna gave today, right? Talking about this loss of hope, right? Of this loss in the hope of in God, right? And the loss of wanting to go see Christ. And this is a big temptation that many of us face. We struggle, we battle, and then we fall, and we fail, and then we lose hope, and we want to give up, right? And I like the way Abuna talked about it today. He says, those on the front lines, they do battle, and they fight, and they get injured, and they have to move, they get hit back, they get knocked back on their heels, but then they get back into the battle. So despondency is this problem, right? It's this loss of hope. And according to St. John, there's another word, tedium, which means being tiresome, wearisome, or monotonous. So you're tired, and it's just starting to wear on you, this battle. So according to St. John, tedium is a paralysis of the soul. So the word paralysis means basically to be paralyzed. When someone is paralyzed, they can't move. And this paralysis of the soul can affect us in such a way that our soul doesn't move forward. A slackness of the mind, a neglect of religious exercises, a hostility to vows taken. It is an approval of worldly things. It is a voice claiming that God has no mercy and no love for men. It is a laziness in the singing of psalms and a weakness in prayer. So this is often what we can get caught up in as Christians, even as Orthodox Christians especially, because we have the rituals of the church, we have the cycle of the church, and so we think to ourselves, okay, well, I'm in the cycle of the church. I come to church and I take communion and I go to the service and I attend this and I attend that, but the spiritual life is bored. It's dead. It's stopped. It's weary. It's tired. It doesn't move forward. And we think because we're doing these other things that it somehow makes up for this, and we're okay with that. You know, I don't really want to get much closer to God. I don't really want to try any harder. I've struggled against the sin before. That's just the way I am. We say these things, right? And so this is what happens when something becomes tedious, or we have this despondency, this loss of hope, and it's very dangerous. The word for despondency in the Greek language is akidia. It indicates listlessness or torpor. Also distraction or boredom. So someone's listless, that means he's like limp. You know, you pick him up and he just kind of drops. Like, I've given up. You know, I can't do it anymore. I'm tired. Okay? And what we see in the saints, the greatness of the saints, wasn't that they necessarily had anything different than what we had. Right? They had the books of the Bible, they had communion, but what they had was a desire to fight. And they just didn't stop fighting, right? Till their very last breath. And in fact, there's a great story about St. Macarius. St. Macarius was on his deathbed, and he was about to die, and the saints said, you know, Tubak, blessed are you, Macarius, you've completed the battle, you've completed the war. And Macarius said, no, not yet. Right? And he's on his deathbed. So you see that fight in the saints, they don't give up, they don't stop. Right? And despondency is the opposite of that. It's I'm tired, I'm bored, that's it, I'm going to give up. Okay? And today the sermon was beautiful in that we never should give up. We never lose faith in the love of God, the love that Christ has for us to come back to him always. So how, according to the ladder, can despondency affect you? So St. John says this tedium can give us headaches, other physical ailment to prevent us from prayer, and then gives the person his strength back when it is time for food. So this is why, when we see this with our kids, I bring our kids to church, and as soon as they stand in church, all of a sudden they're just, he doesn't have enough strength to hold his body up, and you just want to wring his neck, right? And he can go play tennis for 3 hours and run with his friends and do everything, but in church, all of a sudden, his bone structure weakens, his muscles around the spine are soft, and he has to lean, right? And we have the same thing, right? When we go to, we can stay up and we can argue with our spouse and we can yell at our kids, and then we go to stand for prayer and we start yawning immediately, right? And this is Satan's work, right? Immediately interjects physical problems. I'm tired, I'm sleepy. I have a physical problem that prevents me from sleeping or from praying or from doing anything. But when it's time to eat, all of a sudden I'm perked up and okay, let's go eat, right? But during the liturgy, for some reason, everybody was sleepy. And then as soon as it was time to go get coffee and food, everyone was awake and everyone's chatting and talking and happy and want to stay there. They're so excited that. So this devil can give us headaches when it's time to pray. Also, he can suggest to us that we're too sleepy to recite the Psalms or other spiritual words. And this is very common, right? Get some sleep, get your rest, and suggest to us that, maybe now's not the best time for this, right? And every time, by the way, we go to pray and we go to do anything, there is a devil who is sent to us who will try to prevent us from doing whatever it is that gets us close to God, right? So be aware of this and notice these things, that when you go to pray, when you go to fast, when you go to do anything, stay up late, something prevents you, right? And even see it on Sunday mornings. Sunday mornings are kind of famous for crazy days. Kids and parents are fighting. All of a sudden the kids wake up and they're at each other's throats. And you're like, what's going on? What's happening? Right? Satan's trying to prevent this from happening, right? And I try to make it a point to tell the kids, Satan is trying to get us to fight before the liturgy today. And as soon as we get in the car after liturgy, here we go again. He touched me, he looked at me, he said this to me. And again, we want to tell our kids, Satan is preventing us from keeping the grace that we received today. He wants us to lose this grace, right? So keep in mind there's a real battle against, as St. Paul says, principalities, dominions, not a power against what we can see, but against what we can't see. So how does King David get relief from this in the Psalms? He says, I pour out my complaints before him. I declare before him my trouble. So this is beautiful, and this is how David, even in the Old Testament, taught us to pray. I pour out my troubles before him, right? St. Paul says, do not be, I can't remember how the verse starts. I remember it in Arabic, but not in English. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, through prayer and supplication, let your prayers be known to him. So do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, let your prayers and supplications be made known to him. So pour out, open up, right? And this is how we get rid of this despondency. Even open up about the despondency. Say, Lord, I've lost hope. I'm tired. I don't want to battle anymore, right? And Abuna today has a beautiful analogy. He says, it's the ones on the front line that get hurt. It's when you're out fighting that you get hurt, right? And that's the ones that Satan knocks back. It's the ones in the back who aren't doing anything, who are out there saying, hey, there's no battle. There's nothing going on, right? What are you even talking about? And if you feel that way, that there's no battle and Satan isn't fighting me, then you're not doing battle, to be honest, right? If you feel like there is no battle and that life's good and everything's kind of good and I kind of go to church, and then you're not on the front line, right? Because if you're on the front line, you're on the front line. You feel it every day. And he says, when my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then you knew my path. He then declares, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living, for you shall deal bountifully with me. So King David proclaimed his faith that the Lord was his true refuge and trusted that he would be delivered from his enemies by the Lord. So declare to the Lord and open up to him about everything. So this one's kind of a long quote, so we'll just kind of read it together slowly. I don't know if you can see it. I try to make it as big as possible, but a specific effort must be made to resist this stage and push through it. So this idea of despondency, this is normal. This happens to all of us, where we just kind of give up hope. And you have to recognize it as a stage, and you have to say, I have to push through it, right? Even if I don't have the warm feelings of prayer and the warm, the feeling closeness to God, it's okay. I still will push through it. And Boone always tells us a story about Mother Teresa, how she had a very long period of not feeling God's presence and feeling, cold inside. And for years and years, she pushed through. Right? So this is normal. This happens even with the saints. St. John comments that each of the passions can be defeated by a specific virtue, but that despondency is a general death which we must defeat by using all the practices, skills, and virtues. So he calls it like a death, because it is sort of, when you give up, there's nothing to battle. There's no fight. There's no virtue that you can put it. You're just like, I don't care. I've lost hope. Do not expect that by doing nothing, God will grant you the desire to continue the journey. You cannot wait for some miraculous and divine intervention. You must, at the very least, pray continually for the desire to continue the journey and the struggle. Look what he's asking for. Pray for the desire to continue the journey and the struggle. Right? So God even says, just ask me to give you the desire to do the struggle. So not only is he going to do the struggle with me, which we're going to talk about later, and he's going to carry me during the struggle, but he says, pray and I'll even give you the desire to fight, and then I'll fight for you. Right? So this is the kind of God we have. Right? Ask me for the desire, I'll give you the desire, and then I'll fight for you. You just need to ask me to be by your side. The spiritual life is not a quid pro quo. It does not consist of one action by you, followed by an action of God. Just because you rise to pray one day does not mean God will grant you some reward of feeling spiritual euphoria. So it's a relationship, and that's what he's going to talk about here in a second. It's not like I pray, okay, now God give me a feeling. It doesn't work that way. If you wait for the feeling to justify you continuing your effort, you will be gravely disappointed. So the point is, we must do the effort not waiting for some feeling or for something like, okay, God, I prayed, now give me something back. You don't wait for it. You have to push through even though you don't have the feeling. God, it seems, does not operate like that. But these times of despondency are perhaps the most crucial test of your resolve and your desire for union with God. So it's these moments that are the most important moments. This is when you push through. Okay? And it is these moments that are, as he says, the most crucial test of your resolve and your desire for union with God. It is up to you to push through these times with renewed effort. You must get up when you would rather sleep. You must pray when you have no desire to pray. You must read the scripture when you would rather watch TV. Do not feel you are gaining anything if you pray and meditate when you enjoy them and receive some level of spiritual fulfillment. It is only when we are obedient, when we don't feel like being obedient, that we begin to experience the life of submission and humility that is the path of God. You know what it's like? It's like, when I buy my son a brand new bicycle, and he's so excited. Thank you, Daddy, for my beautiful, I love this bicycle. Thank you so much. Okay, Habibi, can you take out the trash? Of course, Daddy. So now, he took out the trash when I asked him, fine. And I'm going to give that some weight, but it's not very much weight. Right? Every once in a while, when he's in a really bad mood and something bad happens, I said, now take out the trash. And he goes, I'm not taking out the trash. Right? Now that's the time when he takes out the trash, when he's in a bad mood or he's mad at me or something's not going his way, and I say, take out the trash, and he says, Hadir Baba, and I'm going to take out the trash. Then he's earned something in my sight, hasn't he? Because he did it when things are bad. Right? When I just bought him a bicycle and I tell him to take out the trash, he does it. I'm not very impressed because I just got him a bicycle. Right? So our Heavenly Father is the same way. Right? When he gives us a lot and we feel blessed and we feel like we have so much in our family, in our houses, in our cars, and whatever else material things we have, and we feel so happy, and then we pray, God's like, okay, that's wonderful. But it's when we're really down and we still pray, right? Then God says, now this is my son. Right? It's like the son who takes out the trash when you've just punished him, and you've just taken away his iPad, and then you say, now take out the trash, and he says, Hader Bab. And now you know you did something right, when he still listens in that moment. So this is what he's saying. You got to push through these moments. This is a different icon of the ladder that I saw that I liked. So the next one we're going to talk about, step 14, is gluttony. Gluttony, as you know, is eating too much. And eating is a passion that's related to other passions. This is why in fasting, we limit what we eat. Okay? Filling our stomach, even the saints say that filling your stomach isn't a good idea. Don't eat until you're full. Just eat what you need, especially during fasting. Right? The stomach is the pathway of Satan to other desires and lusts in the body. And some of the fathers say that eating meat even causes lust and desire in the body. Okay? So gluttony is one of these things that we control during fasting. But there's also another kind of gluttony that I think Americans and some of the more sophisticated people that I meet tend to have, which is a different kind of gluttony. It's not overeating. It's just overthinking about food, right? So every once in a while, you go to a restaurant and you see people and they just take a glass of wine and they, oh, this is a very good year. This is from Napa and this is from whatever. And this chef, he knows how to make salmon, right? I mean, this is the only place in town that can make good scallops, as far as I'm concerned. No other place cooks the way these guys. And this guy, he knows how to make a steak. Now, I'm not overeating, am I? But I'm overconsumed with food. I'm thinking about it a little bit too much, right? And in the book Screwtape Letters that C.S. Lewis wrote, he talks about this, right? And he talks about it in England, where they talk about, well, this is the only place that makes good crumpets and cream. The cream here is good. And that other place, they don't know how to butter the toast. They dry it, way too much. And people do this, right? And maybe they're not overeating, but they're over-consumed with the food. The ingredients and the way it's cooked and the chef and the wine and the pairing and Satan can get to us in multiple ways, right? And I see someone so consumed with the wine and that, and this has to be in the red wine with the meat and the white wine with the fish. And really? Let's not get a little too carried away. It's food. You eat it so you don't die, right? You have it so you have enough strength in your body to continue. Don't let it get to you. And don't get sucked into this world where you read Restaurant Magazine and they go to these reviews and my kids watch Soup Wars or whatever, Kitchen Wars or something on TV, and these judges are like crazy. It's like, it's a cupcake, So gluttony, and I put this in green. Gluttony thinks up seasoning, creates sweet recipes, right? So gluttony isn't just eating a lot of food. It could be gluttony in another way. So just be careful. Part of fasting is to expose the lie of this hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of the stomach is not located in the bodily organ itself, but in the mind's relation to the stomach. It's in the mind. So when you fast, don't just not eat a lot, but eat simply. Eat simply, Just grab whatever's there and just eat it. Without thinking, how am I going to prepare it, and how am I going to make this, and how am I going to make this siami, and that's the same sin. Right, for siami. Okay? Eat simply. I'll continue so we can have a chance to... Now we're going to talk about chastity. A chaste man is someone who's driven out bodily loves by means of divine love, who has used heavenly fire to quench the fires of the flesh. And this is a very important point, and I want to kind of relate it to something Abuna said today, which is, again, don't think about the sin. Think about God. And as someone told me today right after church, our eyes are in the front of our head, not in the back, right? So look forward. Don't look at the sins that passed. A chaste man is someone who has driven out bodily love by means of divine love. Don't forget the last sentence. Don't think who has driven out bodily love is the goal. That's very hard to do. To drive out the passions and the desires and the lusts of the flesh, the desire for power. That's very hard to do unless you do the second part, by divine love. Because if you just try to draw out the other stuff, it's impossible, right? It's like taking a room that's very dark and taking the darkness out of the room. You can't take darkness out of a room. All you can do is put light into a room. Right? And if you try to take the darkness out, it's just not going to work. Right? It's like trying to stop eating junk food and not replacing it with a healthy meal. You're just going to want more junk food. Right? If you're hungry and you walk into the pantry, it's game over. Right? The best thing you can do is eat something healthy first, and then you've got a chance to walk in the pantry and make it out, unscathed. Who has used heavenly fire to quench the fires of the flesh. Again, same concept, right? How do we quench the fires of the flesh? If you just try to put them out, it's not going to work. You have to use the heavenly fire, the divine love, and put it instead of the earthly and the fleshly fire. So a long quote, but I'll read it to you slowly. A man who decides to struggle against his flesh and to overcome it by his own efforts is fighting in vain. So very important time during fasting. Very, very important thing to think about. If you want to overcome the flesh by your own efforts, you're fighting in vain. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Not only does God say, I'm going to help you, but earlier we talked about how we ask God to give us the desire to fight. So first he gives us the desire to fight, and then he says, but if you try to fight on your own, you're still fighting in vain. So first I'm going to give you the desire to fight, and then I'm going to fight for you. Right? And bringing God into the fight is the easiest way to victory. The truth is that unless the Lord overturns the house of the flesh and builds the house of the soul, the man wishing to overcome it has watched and fasted for nothing. So basically, unless the Lord builds the house, there's a psalm that says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor to build it do so in vain. When we were building our church in Seattle, we used to have a building committee, and at the beginning of each building committee minutes, we would put that verse at the top of the minutes. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor to build it do it in vain. Right? And so St. John is using that same psalm, and he's playing with it a little bit, and he's saying, unless the Lord overturns the house of the flesh and builds the house of the soul, the man wishing to overcome it has watched and fasted for nothing. Offer the Lord the weakness of your nature, admit your incapacity, and without knowing it, you will win for yourself the gift of chastity. And again, I'm just basically reminding you of Abuna's sermon today, but Abuna had this very nice quote from St. Gregory of Nyssa. He said, him who carries a cart full of his own accomplishments with pride is much worse than someone who carries a cartload of sins in humility. And look at the end of this. It says, offer the Lord the weakness of your nature. So what do we offer? Offer your weakness. Offer, I have nothing to offer. That's what we offer. Right? Offer the weakness of your nature. Admit your incapacity, and without you knowing it, you will win yourself the gift of chastity. Right? And again, Abuna made this point where he says sometimes these own things are hidden from your own eyes for your own protection. Right? You may never see them. Right? And it's for your own protection that these things are hidden. So this idea of chastity, St. John kind of offers a progression. I'll talk about this very quickly. I don't know, can you read this in the back? Nanny, can you see this? Again? Can you see it, Lois? No? Okay. You need to get better LASIK. So the first one is provocation. So this is something that just kind of comes, right? It's a word or an image, and it just appears to you. And St. John says this is not a sin. Okay? So when someone says something to you that should anger you, or an image flashes before your eyes that should get you, and this is not a sin, this is the work of the devil. And then he says coupling, a conversation with what has been encountered. So now you see the image, and then you kind of have a thought about it. Oh, I know why she said that. She said that because of this. Or I know why he did that. He wants everyone to know he's doing that. Right? Or you start to, some people who have hair, you know how they play with their hair sometimes? This is what you're doing with this idea. Right? You're just kind of twirling with it a little bit. Okay? And St. John even says maybe this isn't even quite a sin yet. Right? You've seen it, now you've kind of played with it like, oh, I know what she's doing, or I know why he said that, or oh, that he just does that so everyone looks at him, or you have that second thought. And he says, okay, that one will pass. It's the third one that becomes the problem. Ascent, the delighted yielding of the soul to what has been encountered. Now, I yield my soul into it, right? Now I'm not just twirling with it, I'm going to really play with it, right? And I'm just going to let it in there, and I'm going to think about it. I'm going to say, oh, well, you know why she did that, or you know why he said that, or, I look at the image and I start to think about it a lot more. Captivity. Now we can even go further. Captivity. Now you're captive. A forcible and unwilling abduction of the heart, a permanent lingering with what we have encountered. Now it's gone inside. Now it's part of me at some level. Now it's very dangerous, right? Now the thought, as opposed to just being something I've played with or brought it in, now it's inside. It's part of me. I've let it in. Now it goes further. Struggle. Force equal to what was leaving the attack. This fourth, and this force either wins or loses. Passion, last step. Something that lies hidden for a long time in the soul and by its very presence takes the character of a habit. So now the sin has become a passion, which means it's something that's in you, it's part of you, it's who you are, and it's how you react every single time. Okay? So every time that person speaks or does, you have that same thought. And it becomes a pattern. It becomes a habit. It just becomes the way you approach things. Okay? And in last week's sermon, Abuna was talking about his thoughts when someone confesses. And he says, when somebody says, I've lied, the thought that Abuna has to have is, it's great that lying isn't a part of you, and that's why you're here to confess, right? It's not a part of you. It's something that's outside the norm, and so I'm going to confess about it because it's not part of who I am. It's not my nature. It's something I did wrong. The worst thing is the person who's lying and just thinks, I guess that's how we do this. I just lie. I lie all the time. But the person confessing clearly doesn't think lying is a part of him or her. Okay? So when it becomes a passion, it becomes a part of you. It becomes a pattern of behavior. It becomes what you do and how you react to the situation. That's very dangerous, right? And now you aren't pulling out a tree or a sapling. You're pulling out, you are trying to pull out a tree that's gotten roots, right? And the person who's stolen $1 million, when you asked him, how'd you steal $1 million? He said, well, 7 years ago, I stole a candy bar. And that went really well. So then I stole another one. And then I stole a few dollars from here, and I stole a few dollars from here. And next thing you know, I'm committing fraud. And next thing you know, it's big. And the person who, cheats on his wife or commits adultery, how did that start? Well, it started by a look, and then it started by a joke, and then it started by an article, and then it just continued, right? And so the people who want to fight this battle, they have to really be principled. They have to say, at the very start, I don't lie. I don't look. I don't steal. Period, right? And even if it's, God forgive me, I've done this many times, right? Taking a pen out of the company storage facility for my own personal use, right? There are people who say, that's not my pen. It's a principle. And you're like, yeah, but it's a pen. You're entitled to pens. There's 1 million pens. They're only $1 each. Give me a break. But you see the difference. It's a principle, right? Because that pen will go to the stapler, will go to a laptop, will go to to whatever, right? Next thing you know, you got a whole team of stuff in your house, right? So it's these principled stands that become very important to keep sin from going any further, right? And that's the difference, right? It's holding that line very, very firmly. I'll tell you, on Thursday is the feast of a priest named Abuna Michiel Ibrahim. Has anyone heard of him? Very famous priest. He was a saintly man. He died just a few years ago. He was the father confessor of Pope Shenouda. And Abuna Michiel, I'll tell you an interesting story about him. I just read this 2 days ago. He put his, he gave his suit, this is when he was still a layperson, he gave his suit to be dry cleaned. And when he went to go pick up his suit, or to be ironed and dry cleaned, when he went to go pick up his suit, the owners told him, I'm sorry, someone robbed the store and your suit got stolen. Okay? And so what do you think Abuna Michiel's response was? He asked him, well, did you iron the suit before or after it got stolen? And he said, well, we ironed it first, and then they stole it last night. And he said, well, let me pay you for your ironing. And the guy's like, your suit got stolen. You don't have to do that. I mean, it's totally, we're sorry. But he says, no, you did your job. You did your work. You did what you're supposed to do. And I'm going to pay you for that. It's not fair to you to do that work and not get paid. So I'll give you another example, and you can see what I'm thinking. Once he was writing a letter, and someone came up to him and said, Abuna, could you sign this, or I need something else, from something personal. So he put down the pen, he took a pen out of his pocket, and he wrote with the other pen. And they said, Abuna, why'd you switch pens? He said, well, that's the church's pen. This is my pen. And what you're asking me to do is personal. So I have to use my pen, not the church's pen. And this could be extreme, right? But I want you to see, he draws a line. No, this is the church's. This is, you did your job. You see, I can only think of the Arabic word, right? The precision with which he thinks, right? He's very precise. Right, wrong. He draws lines, and there's no fuzziness in the lines. And this is how we avoid this. The easiest place to kill this thing is at the provocation. Right? The easiest place to stop it is very early. Right? When something's a small little plant, you can pluck it out. When it grows roots, it becomes very difficult, and you have to hire a team. No running, Greg. No running. No running. Stop. Okay. Now don't run back. I'm meaner with my own kids than I am with anyone else. I know. Okay. All right, so let's go to the last steps. I don't want to take you too long. I'm shocked the kids haven't come in yet, so I'm pleasantly surprised. But so we're going to talk about avarice and poverty. Avarice, as you all know, is the love of money. Avarice, here's the definition: insatiable greed for riches, inordinate misery, desire to gain and hoard wealth. And this is something, especially here in Orange County, we all have issues with this, and we all know people who have issues with this, right? It's okay. You didn't interrupt me at all. So avarice is this greed, this wanting. Is a worship of idols. Avarice is a worship of idols and the offspring of unbelief. Again, when we talk about idol worship, you think, that's pagan times, Old Testament. Absolutely not, right? Many people have Tesla idols in their driveways that they worship. If you ever talk to a Tesla owner, he is an idol. I've met, not all of them, some of them are idol worshipers, right? They put that thing, and they'll talk to you about it for a good 3 hours. And you're like, wow, that's just a car with 4 wheels and gets you from place to place, right? Right, it's just a car. It's not an idol. The man who conquers this vice, avarice, has cut out care. But the man trapped by it can never pray to God. This is harsh to hear, right? Because what avarice does is the love of money, the love of anything, it just drags you down. It hooks you. And you're hooked to the thing, right? And you no longer consume the thing consumes you, right? You no longer own the thing owns you, right? And you see people with their cars or their clothes or their, in my case, bikes, and they just have this love, and, there's a scratch on it, and there's, who did this? And they're owned by it. They're controlled by it, right? So the avarice, this love of stuff, just drags you to earth, right? And when we were at the convent a few weeks ago, the nun gave us a beautiful analogy of St. John of the Cross, where she said, basically, you're climbing up a mountain, and you've got a backpack with a lot of stuff, and the road gets very heavy. And after a while, you just got to start lightening the load. So after a while, you just take something, you go, well, I don't really need this that much because I can't go up this hill anymore, and you throw it. And this is part of the beauty of aging, of old age, right? By losing our health, we lose our desires, we lose our passions, and slowly we're able to throw away the world a lot easier, right? We see it for what it is. I heard a nice sermon by Abuna Loa, and he's talking about Lazarus. this story. And he said, Lazarus died for 4 days. And then Christ brought him out. He said, can you imagine Lazarus' perspective after he came out of the tomb? Can you imagine what he would say if he saw two people fighting over a fish or something? Who cares? Right? I mean, I've been dead for 4 days. And now I've got a second chance. And you two are fighting over what? What's wrong with you? Can you imagine his perspective on everything? Anything that happens, anybody that does something, he goes, no problem, Habib, I forgive you. Right? His perspective is fantastic. Right? Imagine if we had that perspective of Lazarus. Like, we've seen death, and now we get a second chance. How would we act? Right? What would we give up? Would we care about the car? Would we care about the scratch? Would we lose our peace and yell at someone for doing something to one of our things, our clothes, or our ego, or ourselves? Of course not. Who cares? I'm dead. I've got a second chance. We should all have that feeling all the time. Right? We were dead in our sins, and we were born again in baptism. We have this second chance. So the perspective we get has to be completely different. Everything about the world, you would think, who cares? Who cares? Right? And I'm sure Lazarus, if he got asked, do you want that promotion at work? You'd have to work a lot more hours. Who cares? Right? My whole life is now Christ. And this is what St. Paul said, right? For me, to live is Christ. And to what? Who can finish it? To die is gain. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. That's the perspective. So avarice, the last bullet, causes hatred, theft, envy, separation, hostility, stormy blasts, remembrance of past wrong, inhuman acts, and even murder. It can do this because we allow it to get between us and God. Avarice drags us down into the world. And again, I don't know why, but today, I'm remembering all of Abuna's sermons, but a few weeks ago, 4 weeks ago or so, Abuna talked about death, and he said, thank God we die. Thank God for death, right? Because we observe all of those things, and we see people grabbing for money and hoarding money and caring about the world, and they're going to die. And we know we're going to die. Imagine if we weren't going to die. Imagine if we could take it with us. What people would act like. I mean, you see people literally killing each other over money. And they're both, the guy who's killing is going to die anyway. He can't take it with him, and he should know that. But imagine if he could. Imagine how many more murders we would observe over money, and how many more people would steal from banks and steal from each other. Right? So death becomes this, kind of in the end, as we say at the end of the Catholic epistle, the lusts of the world. So what happens when you get old? Do not care about the world. The lusts thereof, the world shall pass away. The world shall pass away. Right? And that's the perspective we have. St. John answers the person who claims he wants to earn a fortune to help the poor. So someone asked him, well, I want to make a lot of money so I can help poor people. It's a good one, right? He says, think about the story of the widow and the two mites. Okay? She was more righteous because she had given all that she had. Likewise, no one needs to earn a fortune under the pretense of helping the poor. More likely, the fortune will be a stronger temptation than you expect. So he's basically saying, look at the widow, the two mites. She didn't have much. She just gave 2 mites. But she gave it with a good heart. That's all you need to do. Don't say, I need to make a lot of money so I can give a lot of money. Just give 2 mites, 2 pennies, but give it with a good heart. And she was far more blessed than the person who earned more and gave more. Right? So again, you see someone like St. John has a very clear vision. Right? Someone comes up, well, I want to earn more so I can give more. He sees it for what it is. It's an attack by Satan. It's a devil trick to get you to get lured into money. Wealth is not bad. It is not compatible with a spiritual life, but it is not incompatible with a spiritual life, but it does make it more difficult. And again, this is the concept we talk about in everything Orthodox, right? Nothing is bad, right? Money is not bad. The body is not bad. Alcohol is not bad. Sex is not bad. Nothing is bad in and of itself, but rather we take those things and the way we use them we can use them for good or for evil, right? And it's the worship of these things and the over-exaggeration of these things that becomes bad. Right? Once I was talking to some teenagers, and I told them that rebellion, which is a natural feature of teenagers, I'm learning, is not a bad thing, right? And it's something given by God to us, right? The spirit of rebellion. And we use it to rebel against the world, right? Because when you walk into a place and everyone cares about something and you don't care, that's a spirit of rebellion that you have against the world. You want to rebel against the world, like I don't care about who's singing that song or who's wearing what or who's doing whatever, who's driving a Tesla and who's not, right? I don't care. And that spirit is a God-given spirit. But sometimes the devil can take that spirit and say, well, let's use it to rebel against God. Right now we have a problem. Right? So even something like rebellion is something God gives us. All the passions are something God gives us. We use them for good or we use them for evil. So wealth in of itself, of course, is not bad, but it makes it difficult because now you got more to hang on to. He's right there. Okay, I'll put this quote and then I think we'll end because the talk went longer, thankfully. So, we neither take nor snatch anything away with us. What if we could take something? And I think this is very similar to what Abuna said earlier. This is from Blessed Augustine. Wouldn't we be devouring people alive? I like this. What if we could take something with us? Wouldn't we be like eating people up in our path? What is this monstrosity? What is this monstrously avid appetite, even when huge beasts know their limits? The time they pounce on something, you see it when they are hungry. But when they feel satisfied, they spare their prey. So even a lion, if you watch, the African channel or whatever, when it's full, it doesn't attack. The problem with avarice is it doesn't end, right? Someone who has $1,000 wants 100,000. One who has 100,000 wants 1,000,000. Who wants 1,000,000 wants 10. And the one who wants 10 wants 100. I remember I used to work at a hedge fund back in Chicago, back in the day, and there was a lot of very, very rich people around me. And bonus time came out, and there was a person who looked normal, standing right next to me, who received and I can't even count how many digits it is, a bonus above 10 million. So in the 15 million area. And I would have been quite happy with that bonus. I did not get anything like that. But, he was a very senior guy, and he was very, very upset. I said, what you upset about? You got a $15 million bonus? He goes, yeah, but that guy got 32, right? So because of the system of numbers actually go to infinity. And so there is always a higher number than your number. So you will never be satisfied, right? And that is the nature of avarice, right? So even the animals on the animal channel, right, the nature channel, when they're not hungry, they don't kill. But someone who's avarice will kill, even when he had 15. And this is just this year's bonus, right? Because he got 15 million last year, which means he should be done for the rest of a couple of lives, right? But he's not. He's still upset, right? Will he ever be happy? Of course not. Right? There always exists someone who made more than him. Okay? And this is what avarice does to us, right? It will never be satisfied. And he says at the very end, it is only the avarice and the greed of the rich that is forever insatiable. Right? So that sin never dies. We can continue or we can stop. Tony just came in, so maybe I should just continue just for Tony's sake. Thanks for showing up, Tony. It's nice to see you. Anytime. All right, we'll stop at insensitivity. Speaking of which, does anybody have any questions, comments, anything to add? No? Okay. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Let's stand up and pray quickly. Lord, we thank you for gathering us here today, and we ask you to hear us with all thanksgiving. Our Father, who art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.